I am Tiffany Gorman. I am a doula and a poet, um, and a yoga instructor and an aromatherapist. So I've got a lot going on there. I'm a doula. I am a prenatal, birth, and postnatal doula. And so what that means is that families come to me while pregnant and like, hey, I think I'm going to need a doula. And I will answer any questions that they have about pregnancy, about what the birthing experience might be like. The birthing process, COVID has made things a little different, but really just being that emotional support there for the birthing person and their significant other, if there is one. And then as the postpartum doula, I'm there to help support bringing home a new baby. People don't know we don't live in those big villages anymore. So people don't know what it means to bring home a baby, and they're lost and they're confused, and they've read too many magazines and they've seen too many baby shows, and their expectation is that this person who was born 6 hours ago is going to sleep like a 3-year-old, is going to do things like a 3-year-old. Yeah, that's not what it is. So I help them like gain realistic expectations. I can help you get into a routine of what life is like with me. So that's my role as a doula, really a help. People, it's amazing how differently people do things, and not understanding that the way that they are doing things has been taught to them and is specific to their own family culture, their own national culture, their own heritage. And they think that it's like what everyone does. As a doula, I think that like culture is the main part of being a doula, because I need to understand what a family's needs are, in terms of what kind of birth they want to have. I need to understand that things that may seem normal or average to me may be very wildly different to another family. And because I'm in that like sacred space of a person being born, it's really, really important that I get that connection with that family quickly, that I can establish that quickly, so that they can trust me and that I have their best interest at hand and not my own motives for what this birth ought to look like, or what I think a typical American birth should look like. I think a lot of times Western culture believes that what we do is the right way, and then we think that we ought to tell everyone that we see that you ought to be doing it this way. Yeah, there are times when you need to just not say anything and be okay with how parents are raising their children. That's not our role to tell them how to raise their children. An example, I had a mom who was white who was concerned that her baby was cold. She's like, I know I'm not supposed to put blankets in the bed, but I just don't think that her clothes are enough. And it dawned on me, why doesn't she have on an undershirt? Because as a Black woman, undershirts and undergarments under children's clothes is something that you do until they hit puberty, and then they do it on their own. But I've never had a baby where I didn't have a onesie on underneath their clothes. And so when I suggested that, she was like, that's a great idea. Now that's something so simple, right? I thought that, doesn't everyone put undershirts on their children? And she had never even thought of that. So like little things like that, we don't think of as being part of a culture, but it is. How you dress, how you prepare baby for bed is cultural. And so being able to understand those dynamics and share different perspectives is, I think, key to being a good doula, and key to really working with children and families at their terms and on their terms. I will say I'm very grateful. My parents did a great job in ensuring I understood who I am and where I come from and what our cultural traditions are. Um, so I'm not new to this. Like this is a new topic for a lot of people, um, but this is something I've been aware of and cognizant of my own being for years. So that part hasn't changed. What has changed is how quickly I come to judgment of others. One thing I see a lot of right now is the economic cultural differences, right? There are we don't think of that as a cultural thing, but where you land on the socioeconomic scale, it it does inform what your culture around money looks like. And so oftentimes I am placed with people with a lot of wealth. And some of my first notions was that they're lazy. That's why they're hiring someone else to do this work. And it's funny because that's what a lot of wealthy people think of poor people, right? That they're lazy. That's why they're poor. And I think that, being in that middle range, I see both sides, how people can have that perception. And it took me school really to learn that, yeah, no, it's not that they're lazy, inherently lazy, is that their wealth has afforded them to live in a world where other people do what we think of as normal everyday activities. Those type of activities are the mundane and not for them. And it's like, oh, your mother did this with you. She had help and her mother had help. And then when we look at it, in American culture, and we take it back, it goes back to slavery. It goes back to, you've always been the help here. I've never had to do this before. So there's a lot I don't know because we don't do this. We outsource this part of our family life. When we think of these concepts, we're thinking of them oftentimes in these big, broad, large macro terms, and it's really the small little things. It's the little things that make the difference, uh, and that only comes from expanding your own personal knowledge. So I read a lot of books from different authors about different kinds of experiences, so that I have a frame of reference. I watch a lot of documentaries about historical facts. Um, I watch a lot of historical movies so that I have some, even if it's foggy, even if it's not completely accurate, I have some awareness of what other people do, so that when I encounter them and meet them, I could be like, oh, okay, I have this reserve knowledge. Let me ask them if this is something that they do. And I feel more comfortable asking. And they may tell me, yeah, nah, I was born in Arkansas and we don't, yeah, nah, my mama didn't do any of those things. Okay, good to know. Sometimes there's that fine line between stereotyping and generalizing and understanding someone's culture, right? Like, you don't want to think that you know so much that you think that what you know applies to every single person that you see who you identify as being a part of this culture. Because what you will soon find out is that you're wrong. You will soon find out is that you're wrong. So asking questions, I think, is like the most important thing. You have to be comfortable to ask questions and not feel embarrassed or not feel that you're being intrusive, because you're not. How are you going to do your job if you don't have these answers? I have a family who just had a baby today. And so I'll start with them next week, and I'm going to be with them for 2 months. So there I have an opportunity to really get to know them and talk to them. And it was interesting because in our interview, um, mom and dad let me know that they were French nationals. And when they said that, I have a culinary background, and I studied a lot about France. So the first thing in my mind was that, they probably appreciate really good food, which is different than American culture. Like, yes, individuals appreciate good food, but France as a country, culturally, food is super important for them. So I thought I'd let them know, hey, I have a culinary degree. And so when it comes to postpartum food, you said you were French nationals. I have a bunch of ideas. And dad right there was like, I'm sold. I've asked doulas about what this postpartum food looks like. And I'm Chinese, and culturally, I want my wife to have Chinese postpartum foods. And I was like, I got you. Having that cultural awareness of not only that he's a French national, and so I understand that how food plays a part in his life, and then knowing he was Asian, and then him telling me he was Chinese. Okay, now I have recipes going on in my head because I have this information already, because it's been important to me to know more than just what it is that I eat. That's when that parent teacher relationship is super important. When they drop them off in the morning, having those few minutes of conversation. And I know now with COVID, they're not able to come in and drop off. So emails, the Zoom calls, maybe even having like a prepared list of questions that you send out to all of your parents. What kinds of things do you do? What kinds of songs do you sing to comfort your child? What kinds of touches do you give to comfort your child? Little things like that. So I know before COVID, I had a family, Russian, and their little boy didn't speak much English. So what I asked them was to write out phonetically sayings of reassurance, so that when he got upset, I could say these things. And I practiced with mom. And when dad would come in the evening, I would practice again so that I knew that I was saying it properly. And then that way, me and that little boy, oh, we had such a connection. But then that connection came because I was interested in who he was and asked his parents, how do I connect with him? In what ways can I connect? And he was problemsome for a lot of other teachers. But I didn't have those same issues with him because he saw me differently, because I saw him differently. I had made that connection with him. So by the time he was 3 and he was raising all the hells in the rooms, I could come into the room and get him to stop when other people couldn't. So when dad would come to pick him up, most of the teachers only had negative things to say. He was doing this, he was doing that. And I was able to come and say, you know what? Yeah, those things happen, but here's the great time he and I had together. Just to give him that reassurance that, like, it's not all bad. Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes parents don't want to get to know you. And that's when you've got to use your people skills and push past that and get to know them regardless. If they understand that the reason I need to know you is not because I need to be your friend, but because I need to understand your child, they usually come around. Biggest challenges is knowing where my cultural identity ends and the family's begin, right? So like, I may personally think that this is not a good idea, but I have to ask myself, is it safe for baby? If it's safe for baby, then my personal ideas don't make a difference. They don't matter. And so really being able to check myself and saying, what is it that this family wants to do? So do I think that you need to change a baby to take a nap every single time they take a nap, out of their clothes and into something else? Yeah, no, I think that's extra. I think that's a lot of extra work that you're putting on yourself, but that's not my decision. And so if that is what is wanted from me, it's not hurting baby. So I do it. And I do it with a smile. And I don't do it with, extra commentary of why this is not a helpful practice. Um, that's not my role. Um, to make them feel empowered, so that when they're in the hospital setting, if that is where they are, they don't feel like they're at the mercy of everyone around them. That they feel that this is their birth and that they can own it. And I am there really to be that support and that extra nudge, that extra voice in their head, that little good angel that says you can do this. Because oftentimes we know that the medical system is biased and racist, and so Black women and women of color go in and they don't have their needs met. They aren't listened to. They will say something doesn't feel right, and the doctor will say, "That's in your head. You're fine." And I am there to say, describe to him exactly what isn't feeling right, and then more, and then more, until that doctor says, "Oh, okay, maybe we should run a test, or maybe we should do whatever," so that that person is really listened to. So with the social justice movements that are going on, looking at race and class, it's been interesting. I know I have found myself asking people directly if they are anti-racist before working with them, just so that I understand what lens they're coming from, and so that I know, what how they may view me and my position. Is it of value, or is it a necessity, um, or is it an expectation? Because that you get different vibes from people based on whether or not they think of you as an expectation. I always expected to have someone in the house with me helping me with my kids, versus I really needed the help and I didn't know where to go for it and I reached out to you. You get different reactions. So when I ask someone if they're anti-racist, what I want to know is not, do you think racism is bad, but what actions are you taking to diminish racism within your own internal being and the people in your community and in your village and in your workplace? Are you using the power and privilege that you have to make a change? What actionable things are you doing? So I just come out and ask it. And of course, right now folks don't want to say no, but the next part of the conversation really informs me of what their true answer is. I was a nanny for a woman and her little boy, who is now going to be 5. Um, I can tell you they are anti-racist, and I can tell you that by, she came home one day and had a book for her son, and she had read it to him a couple times, and it was about a butterfly. The caterpillar first was a brown caterpillar, and the caterpillar kept saying how they didn't like being brown and brown was ugly and they wished that they were more beautiful. And she threw the book away. She said, "I don't want to be reading to my son something that says brown is ugly and inherently bad, because that, even though this is just a caterpillar, that will inform him that brown things, people, persons are also ugly and not worthy." That is actionable. Is it a huge thing? Did she go out and revolutionize and change the world? Yes, she did, with her one son. She made sure that she protected his ideas of what is beautiful by simply throwing away that book. So that's what I'm looking for when I'm asking people, are you anti-racist? What are you doing to fight racism? When we're looking at culture, we need to be thinking of it holistically. It's not just, well, how can teachers make sure that they bring in brown dolls for the babies? No, it's how our leaders in our organizations treating our employees. How are they dealing with the issues that employees are going through? How are they are they anti-racist? What kinds of initiatives are they taking and doing within the community that they're in to stop these things from happening? What do their hiring practices look like? How did they move people around? How do people get promotions? all of these things are the things that need to be looked at. It's not just making sure that the dolls are in different colors. And I think a lot of times we're short-sighted and we think only about the 2-year-old and not about everybody who's in the mix. I think it's important that staff reflects children. I think it's important that leadership reflects staff, reflects children. So I've worked in spaces where leadership is all white, teachers are all Black, children are all white. That in and of itself creates a power dynamic that's imbalanced. The children need to see folks who look like them, and the teachers need to see folks who look like them. You know, we like to separate culture from everything else. Like it's this separate thing that we can bring in when we want to and not have to have when we don't think it's necessary, as opposed to understanding that culture is the air that we breathe and that we bring it with us everywhere that we go. And our views shape how we interact with people. It was 2017 when Philando Castile was killed, and I was working at a national daycare center, and all of my co-teachers were Black. Everybody in the building was Black, and our director was white. And as the days kept going, I'm like, is anyone going to acknowledge that we might be in pain here, that coming to work every day might be hard? Right now, we're seeing people getting killed on the street in front of their babies. Like, is anyone going to do anything or say anything to us to let us know that, like, yo, we're here? And it was nothing. And so I wrote a letter directly to the CEO from my work account and asked, have you bothered to ask any of your teachers in Minnesota how they're doing? Have you asked anybody? And 2 days later, we had an 800 number that you could call if you're dealing with any mental illness because of this. If you needed to take a day off, like you could take. But the fact that there was nobody in leadership who could have possibly seen that this is something that we need to address, because we know that our work staff population is majority women of color, that they may be concerned about their husbands, their sons, their fathers, their brothers going outside, that it had to be someone who worked there to bring it to their attention. Shows you how important having cultural diversity in that leadership part is. It's imperative. Because then how do we have these conversations with our parents? And how do we have these conversations with the children if nobody up top is even thinking that it's necessary? You know, I think that the biggest thing teachers and administrators and leadership needs to know is themselves. You need to know your biases. You need to know your triggers. You need to know in what ways you dismiss other people. Because folks like to pretend like they don't. I'm very, very clear on my biases. And I say them out loud. I have a bias towards white women. I have high distrust of white women. And so when a white woman mom comes into my room, I know what I feel like on the inside. I start getting butterflies. My heart starts racing. My hands start sweating. I don't trust what they're saying. And I have to check myself and say, you haven't even met this woman. You don't even know her name. You don't even know her name. Take a deep breath, calm that vagus nerve, get yourself together, take mental note, and now begin a conversation. But people rush into things and act as if they are perfect human beings and think great of everyone. And it's a lie. You don't. You do not. Everyone has them. Everyone is prejudiced against somebody for something. So you need to be clear on what it is. And is it deserve? It may be. You may feel that, you know what? Yeah, nah, I've been wronged by these people over and over and over again. I'm going to keep my level of distrust up. But just be aware of it, because then you know how to move with it, around it, through it, over it, under it. But if you're not even aware, that's when you make the big mistakes and just say things that completely offend me. But if you're aware, you're able to check yourself. And then you can teach the children how to do the same, how to be aware, right? So you see, Susie never ever plays with Johnny. She always gives him a side eye. Why is she side eyeing him? You can start having those conversations with Susie. Well, Susie, I see whenever Johnny comes in, you look at him with a very mean look. What are you thinking then? I don't like Johnny because he has a red dot on his face, and I don't like the people with red dots. Now you can have a conversation, but that only happens if you are aware of your own. Can you be aware of how other people are interacting with their own?